Hey, let's get working on 1.3. We're going to be working on the Germ Guide app. So as you can see in the screen right now, these are the notes that we have as far as sketches, what the pages are going to look like. This was all put together by the client, the end user, and our designers, so we know what to work with. We're going to be using, again, MIT App Inventor to program it and design it. So this is what the home page looks like. And the other pages, as you can see with crowding, we're going to need to program those. And we're going to need to design them. So let's get working with this. Now, by now, you should have, let me get that out of the way. You should have downloaded your file onto your tablet, and you should have MIT App Inventor open. If not, go ahead and do so. And if you're struggling with that part, see me or see someone that can help you. Okay, so kind of get used to what we're looking at here. This is the designer page. This is the blocks page. You can see how we toggle that up here in the green bar. The designer page has the user interface palette where we have all these different drawers. We can pick stuff. We have the media. We have the viewer screen, what we're going to see on the tablet, which is also what I'll have open here, and we'll refer back to that. You also are going to be able to see the components that we click on and the properties themselves. So the design for the home page is pretty much set for us. And in the blocks, we can see that all the back buttons have already been programmed. Or not the back button, excuse me. The waterborne page, the vector-borne page, and the crowding page are all created. And there's names here in the text box that tell us which screen to go to. So that's all set up for us. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start programming the crowding screen. Once you can get the crowding screen organized here, then you're going to have to do the others. I'm going to show you to the crowding screen and briefly get you ready for the other ones. Okay, let's jump back to the designer. And once we're here in the designer and the crowding page, you can see that it is completely black on the screen. Mine looks completely white on the tablet. Well, one quick, easy way to fix that is while we're up here in the crowding screen of the components, go here to background color. Yours may say default. Either way, we got to turn it to black. Now, when we look at the tablet, it looks exactly the same as our viewer layer here, all black there. Okay? Well, what we need to do after we've been able to get that is it's time for us to start organizing. So while we're up here, let's take care of the crowding screen. And first, we're going to go to align horizontal here, and we're going to change it to center. Now, nothing changes on the screen, but what this allows us to do is to center anything else that we're going to be putting on the screen down the middle. So now we're going to have to add a label. So we're going to go over here to the left underneath the user interface, and we're going to drag a label right here onto the screen, and now you can see that it's nice and centered. What we have to do now is we have to take the label and we have to rename it. So we go over here, we make sure it's highlighted in the components, click rename, and we're going to rename this title label. So remember with camel case, each new word is going to be capitalized. So now we have title label. You're always going to rename your buttons and your labels and things just like they had back button already renamed. Now we have title label renamed. Now for this, there are specific properties we need to change in here. The first thing we want to change is you want to make the font size 30. So all we do is click 30. What happens to the box? It gets bigger. Now after we do that, we're going to change the height. We're going to use pixels, and we're going to change it to 80 pixels. So the height is 80 pixels wide. That basically means if we were to look at this as a little grid, there'd be 80 little dots or lines that go along here to make the pixels. The width, we want to change that to fill parent, and what that will do is it will fill the whole screen. And then we want to put text in there. So down here where it says text, we're going to get rid of text for label 1, and we're going to say diseases associated with crowding. Remember, that's large groups in an area. Now, if I click off, you don't see any text here because right now the default color is set to black. We don't want black, we're going to want white. First, let's align the text to be centered, and then change the color to white, and then now you see it pop up here. Now, what you'll see is after it pops up on the screen there, we can now go look at our tablet and we can see that it's shown up here. If for some reason it doesn't look exactly this way, there's a little trick to first try. First, tilt your tablet on its side and then bring it back up for it to show up there. Little trick. Okay, so now we can see that everything that's working here is showing up live on our tablet. It's great. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add, underneath the title label, we're going to add a vertical arrangement. So we have to go here to the left under the user interface and find the layout palette. We're going to grab vertical arrangement and we're going to add this right underneath the title. The measles button and meningitis button are going to go inside this vertical arrangement. This component will automatically organize the buttons vertically on the screen. That's the whole point of this. So we need to change the components of this screen so that it works and it looks the way we want it to. So up here where it says align horizontal, we're going to change this to center. We're going to take the background color and we're going to change it from default to black. Now you may not think it's actually going to make a difference, but that does make a difference so we can actually see. Otherwise, if you look at your tablet, it might be white across the whole screen there. The height, we're not going to touch. The width, though, again, we're going to make fill parent so it stretches across the entire screen, no matter what size your screen is. It's going to fit. Now, we're going to have to add a button to this component. So again, we go to the palette. We're going to go to user interface, and we're going to drag a button, make sure it's inside the green box, and let go. For this button, we're going to make this for the measles button. So we're going to rename it measles button, MEASLES BUTTON. Again, the M and the B are capitalized. Now, whenever we work later, we'll know which button is specific for measles. Now, this one we have to change the properties for this. We're going to have to do this property change 6 times between the 3 different pages. So 6 times total to each page. Be aware that you're going to have to repeat these, so make sure you're paying attention. So background color, let's change it from default to black. Then we are going to make sure that we have a font size of 20. So I'm going to get rid of the 14 and make it 20. Next thing I'm going to have us do is change the width to 50%. So now we're using percent stuff. So we're trying to do all these different ways of seeing how we can measure stuff. We can actually add an image, and it's already been down here in the media. So if we click on image, we'll see button image. We can change that and put that in there. Now our button looks a little different. We're going to make sure the text just says measles. MEASLES, measles. It's already centered, and then our text color we're going to make white. Now look on the screen, you'll see the button looks there, and then on our user interface, it's kind of hard because let's see if I can refocus it. You'll see that there's a blue box, and then the blue box has white writing on it. You may not be able to see it on my tablet, but it definitely can be seen on the tablet in front of you. All right. Now that we have that set up, let's go ahead and move on to adding another button in the vertical arrangement. So back over here under vertical, under user interface, make sure the button is still within the measles section. So we'll make sure that those are attached. Try to put it as close as you can. That way they both stay within the vertical arrangement. So now that we have the button, we're going to go ahead, I don't know why it's doing that. We're going to go ahead and rename this button meningitis, MENINGITIS, capital BUTTON, meningitis button. And hit OK. Now again, we know what each button is. So we're going to do the same property setup for this button as we did the other one. So hopefully you remembered. If not, you can rewind or look at your directions on your pages. So background color, we have to change that one again to black. We're going to change the font size to 20. For the height, we're going to change it to nothing, but for the width, we're going to change it to 50%. We're going to make sure we have the button image. And then we are going to change the text button to just meningitis. MENINGITIS. Text should be already aligned to center, and then the text color is white. Now, if everything looks right on your user interface here, it's also going to look the same on your actual tablet. Again, it's probably hard to see the words. If I zoom it in, there you go. You'll be able to see that the words are white. They're on that blue button. And everything looks exactly the way it's supposed to on our sketch. So the way it's looking design-wise is perfect. All right, so we're going to move on now to the next step. At this time, if you want to pause the video and make sure your app looks the same way mine does, go ahead and do so. If it doesn't, go ahead and check with someone else in the class and see if theirs looks the same. If not, work together to figure it out before you come and ask the teacher for extra help. All right, now that we've built the view layer for this screen, you're going to need to build the controller layer. Because we want the app to play audio clips with the disease buttons that are selected, we're going to need to add the necessary components to perform this action. So again, we're going to go over here to the user interface, but this time we're going to open the media drawer. And in the media drawer, we're going to grab a player. A player component can play sound clips, and it's considered a non-visible component because it doesn't show up on the user face. I'll show you what that means. So we're going to drop the player in here, and then all of a sudden you don't see it there, but if we scroll down, there it is. All right, we need to rename this player Measles Player, MEASLES, capital PLAYER. And now why do we say player? Is because we want to make sure we can determine the difference between the button and the player. So now that we have that, it's ready to play any sound source. So before we do that though, we need to have another player for our meningitis. So we're going to drag that in here, and we're going to rename that meningitis player. All right, so meningitis like I do there. Good. Now now that we have our audio players there, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have the proper source in each one of these. So the source is over here in the properties. So I'm going to click on measles, and the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to source, and I'm going to change measles, or I'm going to change the source to measles MP3. That's our audio file for measles. Change the volume to 100. And I'm going to go to meningitis, and I'm going to change this source to meningitis.mp3. I'm just going to change the volume to 100. Okay. Now our user interface looks exactly how we want it to, and everything is working, or everything's actually displayed, not working yet, displayed the way it needs to on here. Again, you don't see anything down here for the media player. Those are going to show up when we click on the buttons. Now it's time for us to go ahead and move on to the blocks. So go up here in the green bar and click on blocks. So our blocks we already have 2 blocks set in here. They can be moved around this area, doesn't matter. I like to move them up to the top. These are both set up for going back to the other page. So the back button is what happens when you click it. And when back is pressed, it's going to make sure that it goes back to screen 1 from the crowding screen. So there's 2 different ways that you can back up to the home page. And both of them are right up at the top. So if I click back on my tablet, which you didn't see, it takes me to screen 1. If I click on crowding, which I'll show you this time, if I click on crowding here, it's going to take me back to the crowding page. And you can see here on the block spot, now we're looking at the crowding screen. Pretty impressive, I know. You're oohing on already. All right, we're going to start putting together the buttons, the measles and the meningitis button, into blocks so they can play. So we have to go over here on the left under on our blocks, and we're going to pick measles button. And when you click on it, all these different choices pop up. Since we're starting, as we would with our flowchart, the ovals are these lock-in boxes, okay? So I'm going to drag the measles button .click. And what I need to do is I need to bring in the player so that it's going to play the sound. So I go over here, and I'm going to click on measles player on the left. Now when I do that, I'm going to look for the one that starts the audio. And that's all I need. That's enough to be able to play the measles, which we'll check in just a second. Now we have to do the same thing to make the meningitis play. So this time we're going to pick the meningitis button, click, drag it in. And this time we're going to go to the meningitis player down here, and we're going to click start. When we drop that in the box, now everything should work exactly the way it needs to. Let's test it. Here's our measles button, so you can see it. Click it.
With measles, you can have a total body skin rash, flu-like symptoms, and high fever. There's no specific treatment for measles other than drinking plenty of fluids and getting lots of rest.
So once it's done, it ends the play and doesn't play again. It just stops. Meningitis.
Bacterial meningitis is a contagious viral infection that causes inflammation of the membranes that cover the brain and spinal cord. People who have bacterial meningitis will experience headaches, fever, fatigue, irritability, and a stiff neck. Bacterial meningitis is treated with intravenous antibiotics.
All right, so we have our first page completed. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the same exact programming, but now we're going to do it on the other pages. So let's go back to Designer. We're going to use crowding page as our reference. We're going to basically do the same stuff we did over here, and we're going to follow the same exact plan with the other pages. So the first thing we did, remember, is we went to crowding screen, and we made sure that the align horizontal was at center. So let's go to vectors, and before we do anything else, we're going to align the horizontal to center. Make sure you click on the right screen, or the back button may move on you. The other thing we're going to do right away is we're going to change the background color to black. Oops, that's not black, that's blue. Here's black. And now if I look at my tablet, we're looking the same way. This is good. So now the next thing we have to do is go back to crowding screen, and we're going to look at the title label. Now remember, there's not a thing called title label, but there are in the user interface items called label. So we're going to go to the vector screen. We're going to drag the label here, and it should be in the center, just like we wanted it to. We know that we have to rename it title, T-I-T-L-E, label. And now as far as the properties, we're going to go back to the crowding screen, and we're going to make sure everything looks the same. Didn't have to do anything with background color. We have to change the font size to 30, pixels to 80, and width to fill parent. So, font size to 30. Height. I already forgot what it was, but that's okay. I can click back on crowding. 80 pixels. So height is 80 pixels. Width is fill parent. And then I have to put in the wording. The wording, as it says on our sketch. So I kept the sketch page. So now I'm going to look at the vectors page. I'm going to make sure everything says exactly the same thing. So this one, our heading is supposed to say vector, V-E-C-T-O-R, hyphen, born, diseases. And now that should show up on the little box. But again, you're not seeing it because we got to set the alignment to center and change the color to white. Okay. And as I do these things incrementally, I'm always going back and I'm always checking on my tablet to make sure it looks exactly the same, which it does. Okay. The next item, if we look at our crowding page, that we're going to have to create is the vertical arrangement. So we're going to grab a vertical arrangement again from layout, change the horizontal to center, change width to fill parent, and make sure the background color, actually we don't have to change the background color at all. So vectors, we're going to go down here to layout, vertical arrangement right under our title, horizontal arrangement to center, width to fill parent. Okay, everything looks the way it's supposed to. Now we'll go back to the crowding screen and we'll see that the next two things that we have to add are the two buttons. So I'll go to Vectors, and buttons are now under User Interface. So I'm going to drag this time 2 right away, since I know I'm going to use both of them. Okay, button 1 and button 2. Now we're going to have to go back to our sketch page to see which button is which. So if I bring that up for you, our vector borne is going to be Malaria and Dengue Fever. So let's go ahead and change the titles of those and make sure all the other stuff is done properly. First, rename it Malaria, Malaria button, Button. Button 2, we're going to rename this one Dengue Fever, Denguefever. You'll see it's new capital letter for the new word, button. Okay. Now we have to set up our buttons the same way that we had on the crowding screen. So if I go to the crowding screen, I'll see that I have to go ahead and set the background color to black. I forgot to do that on that one. We're going to change the font size to 20. We're going to change the width to 50, and we're going to put the button image in, and then we just make sure it's a white color, centered, and then the word. So again, font size 20, width 50, and then the button image is what we need. So we're going to go to Vectors. Font size is 20. Width is, I can't remember again. This is crazy. But that's why we can go back and look at any time. It was 50%. So width, 50%. And image is going to be the button image. And then this first one is Malaria. Center, and then default color for white. Now you see how we have this white space in here? We still haven't changed that from the vertical arrangement. We just have to change that color to black. Okay, now let's do the second button, which is Dengue Fever. Font size is 20. Width is 50%. And again, if you copy these down or you write these down, it's always good to remember this stuff. It makes it go a lot quicker. Dengue Fever. It's centered, and then we just make sure the font is white. Is there anything that I missed on this one? Do you see it? You should. You should notice that it's still gray, not blue. We have to go to the image and add the button image. Okay. Again, we check it before we move on to the next one. This is incremental approach where we check one little thing at a time. Now let's check to make sure that our tablet looks the same. So you can either pause or we'll go over to mine and we'll see that it looks exactly the same. Again, you can't see, but if I zoom in, you'll see Malaria and Dengue Fever. And again, I'm using proper grammar conventions to make sure everything looks properly. Done. So what else do we need to drag in? Well, if we don't remember, we can go back to crowding screen and we're going to see we need 2 players. They had measles and meningitis, and the only changes we made was the proper source and the volume. So we're going to do the same thing this time on Vectors. We're going to scroll down to Media, and we are going to grab one player, drop it in there, and a second player, drop it in there. The first player we're going to rename Malaria Player. Hit OK. The second one is going to be Dengue Fever Player. Dengue Fever, capitalized, player. Remember, hit OK. So now we just have to go back and change the source. Malaria is obviously going to play Malaria. Dengue Fever is going to play Dengue Fever. And then we'll just make sure the volume is as high as we can go, so we can adjust from there. And now, if we look, our vector screen has the same design, same things as the crowding screen, just different names, but everything looks almost exactly the same. So now we go to blocks, and we're going to do the same thing we did before. I'm just going to move these up out of the way. So we're going to bring the Malaria button, .click. We're going to bring the Dengue Fever, .click. And then we're going to bring the malaria player, call to start for malaria. And we're going to do the Dengue Fever, call to start for Dengue Fever. Last thing before we move on, we're going to make sure we check it and that it works. So let's see if it plays both audios.
Malaria is an infection caused by a plasmodium parasite that's transmitted by mosquitoes. People can contract malaria in hot tropical areas. Symptoms of malaria include drowsiness, poor appetite, fever and chills, headache, and body aches. Malaria is treated with anti-malarial drugs that can be given by mouth, injection, or intravenously.
And then Dengue Fever.
Dengue fever is an infection found in hot tropical areas. It's caused by a virus that mosquitoes can transmit to people. Symptoms of dengue fever include high fever, muscle, joint, and bone pain, headache, rash, and mild bleeding from the nose or gums. There's no specific treatment for dengue fever, but patients should be given lots of fluids to prevent dehydration and should get plenty of rest.
That sounds awful, but the positive is we have another page done. So now we can go back to Designer, and this time we're going to go to Water Screen. Now we can go ahead and organize it the same way we have with all the other ones. Remember, while we're on Water Screen, align the horizontal to center, change the background color to black, and this one changed our back button. I guess I'm not too worried about that, so we'll just leave it the way it is. But we do now need to bring in a label. And we have to rename it Title Label. One word. And what do you remember the properties? If not, we can go to crowd screening. So we can see that the label had a font size of 30, 80 pixels for the height, fill parent for the width. Font size 30, height was 80 pixels. Width was fill parent. And again, the label, as it says on our notes that we already have written down in our notebook, it says waterborne diseases. So I'm going to put it in the same way as it says here. Waterborne diseases. I'm going to make sure the text is centered and that the color is white so we can see it. And there it is. So the next thing we had to include was a vertical arrangement right underneath here. Change the background color to black. Align the horizontal to center. And our height and our width and our image. We don't have any image, but we need to check the height and width. So I'm going to click on vertical arrangement. Height is automatic, so nothing there. Just the width being changed to fill parent. So I'm going to go to width to fill parent. Again, step by step to make sure we don't make any mistakes. What goes in here? You know it. That's correct. We're going to put two buttons. So we'll put two buttons right away. Make sure they're right on top of each other and check that they're both in the vertical arrangement. And they are. So again, the two diseases that we have to put on, according to our notes, is cholera and ETEC. So those are the names we're going to give the buttons. So the first button will be cholera, CHOLERA button. And the other one is going to be ETEC button. Oops, I got to make it one word. Okay, now we just have to make sure our formatting for the buttons are the same. If you remember, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, let's go through it. Crowding showed us that we're going to use a 20 font, 50 width, and then the button image, and the label for the text and color white. So 20 font, 50% width. Let's do that first. We'll do it for both of them right away. 20 width, 50%. And the image is the button image. So I'm going to do the same with the other one right away. 20, because now we know what we're doing. 50%, and the button image. Now I can go back to the first one and change the text to match what was in our notes, our sketches, cholera, and then make sure that the text is white. and then ETEC, and make sure that our font is white. Now, before we move on, incrementally, we're going to check, and we're going to see that our buttons are exactly how they need to be. And you know that there's only one more thing we have to put on the designer page, which is the non-visible components in the media, and that is our players. So again, we need 2 players. First one is going to be named Cholera player. Okay. And the other one is going to be ETEC player. Okay. The source for cholera will be the cholera MP3. We'll change the volume. And the ETEC will be ETEC. So now we've used all our media, and the designer looks exactly the way it needs to for every single one of these, except for the back button being moved. But again, I'm not too worried about that. Not a big deal. All right, we'll go to blocks. And again, what are the 2 blocks we need to pull out to make the buttons work? The cholera button, dot click. The ETEC button, dot click. And now grab the cholera player and have it start. And have the ETEC player also start in the correct one. And the last thing we have to do is we have to test it to make sure that it's working right.
Cholera is an intestinal illness caused by the V. cholera bacterium. This bacterium can be found in contaminated food or water. Symptoms of cholera include diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and dehydration. People with cholera should be treated right away for dehydration and loss of electrolytes. Severe cases can result in death.
Don't want that. Last one.
ETEC is also known as a traveler's diarrhea. It is an intestinal illness caused by a toxic strain of E. coli bacterium, which can be found in contaminated food or water. Symptoms of ETEC include diarrhea, abdominal cramping, fever, chills, nausea, loss of appetite, headache, muscle aches, and dehydration. Patients with ETEC should be treated for dehydration and loss of electrolytes as soon as possible, because severe cases can result in death.
Now I'm just going to hit the back button to take us back to our home page, and we've gone full circle. Everything is working the way we want it to, and it looks exactly the way our client wants and our end users are going to use. There's only one thing that's kind of annoying. If I was to click on crowding and I was going to click on measles, I'm going to show you what happens after I click the back button.
Measles is a highly contagious respiratory infection caused by a virus. With measles, you can have a total body skin rash, flu-like symptoms, and high fever. There's no specific treatment for measles other than drinking plenty
that it kept playing. I can turn it off. It kept playing when I went back to the home page. I challenge you and your partner to go ahead and try to figure out what can you do to each page so that when you click the back button, it doesn't keep playing the sound. That's going to be your challenge for the end of this lesson. And then once you have this all completed, make sure you show it to me or your whatever teacher you have in the classroom so it can be checked off as completed properly. The last thing you're going to have to do are your conclusion questions, and that's it for this activity. We'll see you next time when we're going to take this to the next level and try to advance our design that we created. Good job. See you later.